entrepreneurs who can address local challenges and local issues at the local ecosystems level, and can they in turn generate employment for 5 to 50 people productively with decent wages. So how do you really build entrepreneurial ecosystems? How do you build an encouraging entrepreneurial ecosystem? And this requires a paradigm shift in the value system of individuals, institutions. Youth need to think very differently in terms of their career options. You know, you ask a youth, what do you want to be? Chances are 9 out of 10 times they will say, I want a government job. How do you move them from a government job to becoming an entrepreneur? Right? So how do they get to start thinking of growth, of starting off a business, growing, and then employing more people, right? I, in my mind, visualize a lot of youth entrepreneurs that I work with, and conceptually, I start thinking, how can we create a more nurturing ecosystem at the local level that encourages these youth to go on entrepreneurial journeys, and the entire community around them starts rooting for them, starts praying for the success, starts working towards the success. And this is what exactly this wonderful panel that we have will discuss on how do you make, how do you build and create an entrepreneurial ecosystem that is thriving, which really represents the dynamic India that we've been talking about from the morning. And I'm delighted to have a wonderful set of panelists, Anand Deshpande, founder of the Asra Foundation and the chairman of Persistent Systems. We have Julia Cast, head of project, the entrepreneurship project at GIZ India. We have Raj Gilda, who's the co-founder of Lend-A-Hand India. And we have Dan Eisenberg, who's the CEO of Entrepreneurship Policy Advisors, and has been really creating these local entrepreneurial ecosystems for the last many years. And Dan has woken up early to join us from the US. So, Mekin, wonderful to have you as a moderator for this panel and lead on.
Thank you, Madan. Thank you for getting us started. And lovely to have all the panelists here. And special thanks to Dan, who is struggling with some audio issues, some technical issues at 2 in the morning. Okay. Madan set us off to an interesting thought. And I'm going to start this conversation with a somewhat provocative question. Is entrepreneurship easy? Right? And I'd want all my panelists to take a shot at answering this question from their perspective in terms of what they have experienced. In their understanding, do they find, is entrepreneurship easy? Right? Raj, would you like to start off?
Sure. So, of course, it is not. Otherwise, everybody would have been an entrepreneur. The reason we don't have many of those because it is not easy, and neither we should glamorize it as well. In that sense, I think many times nowadays I have seen that entrepreneurship is viewed as a fashion, or a fad that, oh, you be one and otherwise. So I think it is not easy, but we need to look at that. How do we make it more acceptable, more desirable? At the same time, giving a reality check about what it all entails in the process.
Thanks, Raj. Julia, I would love to have your views, specifically as you see entrepreneurship with women entrepreneurs in India. Do you think entrepreneurship is easy? If not, what do you think are some of the challenges?
Thank you, Mekin. I have to agree with Raj. Of course, it's not easy. And before I speak about maybe the layers that come on top of it because of when you work with women entrepreneurs, I just want to give you an example. When we started in our project, when we started working with the first cohorts of women who wanted to start their businesses last year, we had quite a few of them who came into the program with a really good idea, were very passionate about it. And I think once they realized what is actually behind it in terms of building this idea into an enterprise, but also heard from existing entrepreneurs what life as an entrepreneur is like, some of them actually thought twice. So I think that is an example of, no, it's not easy. In terms of the layer I was referring to, the additional layers maybe that come onto entrepreneurship when you start out as a woman entrepreneur in India, I feel that, of course, there are many that are additional, and I think we all know, we've talked about this in previous discussions also before. It's to do with, I think, a lot of assertiveness that you need to bring with you, a lot of discussion that you need to have in your own families first, with your husbands maybe, in terms of, I think you have to invest, on average, you have to invest more in fighting your way through when you're a woman entrepreneur. Unfortunately, still, I think that is the case.
All right, so Dan has joined us, and Dan, we have gotten us started with a question that you've written quite a bit about, which is entrepreneurship easy? It's been made to sound like very glamorous and aspirational and so on. In your work in entrepreneurship, do you think it's easy?
Well, I'll start by saying that I never encourage my students to become entrepreneurs. I always tell them that it's that probably the economic calculation is that they'll lose more money compared to what they would make in a salaried job. That's just the averages, and that's the empirical data, and therefore, and it is very tough. If you can't do anything else, if like a lot of people, it just fits their view of life, it fits their skills, it fits their abilities, it may be a good career choice. It's very, 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 very difficult.
Awesome. Anand.
Yeah, so let me add to this. So on my Deyasra side, I work with a lot of very small entrepreneurs, so really the micro ones. And in many of these businesses that we work with, the reality is that you are in a business whether you like it or not. And so the question is, yes, you are already an entrepreneur. So if you are one, then how do you make it, if not easy, at least how do you make it work for you? So that is really the key around where you need to go. Whether it's easy or not, I think it's a function of individuals' perspective. People struggle in jobs as well. So I think it's not about the entrepreneurship that makes it necessarily hard. It's your attitude towards it that makes a huge difference. So I think what we can do as a group is to help people. And I have been an entrepreneur for 30 years. I wouldn't trade. I wouldn't do anything else. So I'm really, I tell my kids to become entrepreneurs too.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. So it's good to have a dissenting voice, right? Otherwise, this panel was becoming boring. I'm with you, Anand. I feel that it's not easy, but at the same time, there are a bunch of people who can actually go about doing it. And there are a bunch of people who have to do it. And we have to find ways of figuring out how do we enable them to be able to be successful entrepreneurs. And that brings us to this nuance of the person that you talked about, right? And Madan, when we were introducing this session, and I in my work with Udyam, talk a lot about this thing called entrepreneurial mindsets, right? And I see Julia nodding because she's been working on it with women entrepreneurs as well. What are these entrepreneurial mindsets? Like, what is this? Which pill do I take to develop an entrepreneurial mindset? Anand, would you like to start?
Sure. So, again, I have a slightly different point of view here in the sense that especially the people I work with, they happen to be entrepreneurs, not necessarily always out of choice, but because of fact of reality. So many of these people are not necessarily starting with a plan and they don't go through a course. They just find themselves running a business and they realize that they are suboptimal and can be so much better off if they were to think a little bit about what they need to do. So, a lot of these businesses I work with, they happen to be there anyway. One of the things that we have observed is that a lot of the people, especially in India and especially in the micro and small businesses, are very poorly equipped to run their own businesses. And they could benefit from the training and the mindset and many other things that you talked about. But the reality is that they're already in the business, whether they like it or not. And one of the things that we can work together here is to see how do we ensure that people who are in these business can build those which are scalable, can scale them, because those who are already there, it is in their benefit to grow these businesses rather than struggle as a small single person business that they are today.
Can I point out a paradox in that statement, which
Yes.
I agree with? There's a paradox in it. If some of them grow, which I think is absolutely the right thing, if some of them grow, they will hire the other people who are entrepreneurs, or what you call entrepreneurs, I call them small business owners. They will hire them and get them out of entrepreneurship. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? It reduces a few successful entrepreneurs, let's say 10, 20%, reduces the overall number of small business owners and pays them a decent wage. So is that a better objective socially?
Okay. I think those.
So I would like to chime in here that I think we have to avoid this notion that entrepreneurship means that you need to be on your own. I run an organization with 240 people, and I wish I had 240 entrepreneurial mindset employees, which I have, right? So I think even if somebody grows and is being able to hire people and let them be a micro entrepreneur within a large organization, and even that is completely fine because it is best of both worlds, with a bit of a safety of a larger organization, but you can do things on your own, right? So I think nothing wrong with that, actually.
I think I want to agree that there's nothing wrong with that, but I think there's a problem of definition, and what you're talking about is not entrepreneurs. You're talking about some of the skills that entrepreneurs have that may be more broadly applicable in life or in work, and some of the skills such as initiative and creativity and results orientation is useful for many things.
So Dan, I'm going to use the license you gave me yesterday and interrupt you. We are talking about the entrepreneurial mindset and skills, right? And I want to ask Raj, who do you hire? When you say you wish you had these 240 people with entrepreneurial mindsets, right? And whether they go on to become entrepreneurs and lead other organizations in future or not, right?
Yeah.
How do you define this entrepreneurial mindset?
So Mekin, I don't know, I'm not academic, I cannot define and all that, but I'll tell you a few of the questions we ask our people who are applying for the job to us. One, we ask them, how many times have you failed in your life? And what lessons have you learned? Have you made money before you were 18? Have you been laid off in your job and bounced back? So, and what have you done against your parents' wishes? And actually all our first level filtering happens on the basis, and we don't even ask them academic qualification, because I don't think, if you want to learn swimming, you can't watch YouTube videos, you have to jump into the water. So you can't do an online 4-day course about entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur. You have to live that, right, in the process. And we look for such characteristic in the people who are applying. So for example, in my own case, when I was 10 years old, there was a advertisement with a newspaper vendor that is looking for a boy to distribute the newspaper, and 1 rupee per day will be the a compensation for that. I applied for it, not knowing that my father was a friend of that newspaper vendor, and I got a thrashing for that, right, as RV. So I think, but that shows the entrepreneurial mindset, right, that I'm ready to wake up at 5 in the morning, distribute the newspaper, and go to the school at 10, or something like that. So we are looking for such people, not with a degree or MBA entrepreneurship or social entrepreneurship in those cases, right?
Fantastic.
But Raj, I would argue, if I may come in here, I would argue those qualities that you just described, or those characteristics, that is something I look for in my team, in my organization, we're a government organization. So I'm not sure that I would phrase it as an entrepreneurial mindset. I do agree there are certain skills that are that are favorable for or that entrepreneurs should bring with them, but maybe it's more about a certain orientation that you have, or that you, and I realize very much that I speak from a point of someone who can choose whether to go into entrepreneurship or not. I realize that the reality is different for entrepreneurs like Anand talked about before, who simply have no other choice. But if you look at entrepreneurship from a choice, maybe it's more about an orientation. Can you imagine living a life without some sort of financial minimum security behind yourself, maybe in the beginning. Have you learned from are you sort of open towards new things in your life, or do you prefer to have your thing planned out, your career planned out for the next 10 years? I think maybe it's more about those aspects. That's what I wanted to.
Dan, you have seen many entrepreneurs grow, right? And
Many.
if you were to think about were there skills and mindsets that they possessed, right? Forget the ecosystem and culture and climate for a while. What were some of those that you found? And let's see how they connect with what Raj and you said.
I think if you really, let's say, I've seen hundreds, and the job of the entrepreneur, so to speak, call it job, is to prove us wrong about everything we think. And so whatever we define as the successful qualities of entrepreneurs, I can find you with a very few exceptions, I can find you examples of people who did it exactly the opposite and were very successful. The only really common characteristics are the desire and ability to work extraordinarily hard and persistently. But I can tell you, there are people who hate failure and never fail. Successful entrepreneurs. People who fail a lot and they're successful entrepreneurs. People who are extremely creative. There are people who are very, very systematic and not creative. They're successful. I can find you examples of all the above. But hard work, energy, persistence, are not unique to entrepreneurs. Sorry to disappoint.
No, this is brilliant. I'm loving this. Anand,
so I'm going to just follow up on what Dan sort of ended with, which is where I think I'd like to start by saying that it's all about being persistent. And those who are persistent is really what makes the difference. And again, I agree with Dan. That's nothing to do with entrepreneurship. It's true for it. That's the real key for being successful, whatever you do. And that feeds into each other in some sense. The entrepreneurship stuff, right? I think a lot of this has to do with the desire to get it done. So I want to get things to happen, and I'm willing to make it, and I'm going to make it happen, and I'm not going to wait and be dogged about it. So that's really what makes the difference. And I think so I would go by persistence as the key for success.
Yeah, guess what was the name of the company that Anand started 30 years back?
Well, I still work in it.
I'm loving something.
It's called.
By the way, can I also point out a paradox in the notion of persistence? Because oftentimes in order to be successful, you have to change what you do or stop what you do and do something differently. So even persistence.
But you have to keep doing, though. But you have to keep doing. That is the key, Dan. It's not that you don't do the same thing. You should do different things. You should move on, but you can't stop doing it. I think the biggest problem that we have in India, I see a lot, is we are a nation of quantifiers. We like to give advice, but we don't do anything. We just talk about it. And that's the difference between an entrepreneur and someone who is not. You can just sit and give advice because it's nice.
Okay, this has been a brilliant start. Thank you for getting us off on like a rocker of a start. On what is this entrepreneurial mindset or skill, or what enables entrepreneurs to grow? Have a bunch of thoughts that people have got around what this might be. Let's now jump to from inside the entrepreneur to the outside world, right? So what is that ecosystem that is nurturing? Right? Is there something like a nurturing ecosystem, or entrepreneurs are born in difficulty? Like, our entrepreneurs are a product of difficulty and challenge, or is there something like a nurturing ecosystem that enables entrepreneurs, or that enables higher entrepreneurs, more deep in entrepreneurship? I think this group is now already on fire, so I'm not going to ask anyone. Please jump in.
Well, I'll jump in. So Julia, please go ahead.
You start then.
Well, I don't think you can answer that question without clarifying back to the first part of our discussion about what is and what isn't an entrepreneur, who or who isn't. I define an entrepreneur as a business owner who grows, strives for growth continually. And it's more, I have a more academic definition, but if that's the definition, then for sure you can create the environment, ecosystem, makes a huge difference. It encouraging the ability to make mistakes, take risks, put something on the line, the tolerance of mistake making, the ability to try again. You know, in some places, and I know I've heard, I'm not an expert at all in India, I've heard that there are many structural and cultural barriers to that activity, but certainly, and it's not all regulatory, a lot of it really is cultural and the ecosystem, but there are also programs of all kinds, the support of the media, the support of financial institutions. All these things are not absolutely necessary for any particular entrepreneur, but if for entrepreneurship growth to flourish, you need a lot of that.
And I want to bring in one other aspect that we discussed yesterday, I think in our sort of small pre-discussion round, the connectivity issue, I think, because and I agree with Dan, if we define an entrepreneur as someone who wants to grow their enterprise, if I don't know where to go for certain support, or if I need to connect to certain markets, or if I need investment, I don't know how to get that. And even if I start informing myself, it's not about sitting back and letting myself be advised on or served by other institutions. But even if I try to find out that information, but I fail, and I fail to make those connects, I think that's an example of when the ecosystem doesn't work. And I say that because we see that a lot in the regions where we work with the women entrepreneurs, where I think the ecosystem for both male and female entrepreneurs is very nascent. But for female entrepreneurs, it's even harder for various reasons that I talked about before in terms of the gender dimension of this. But even when they figure out they need some kind of investment, for example, but they fail to identify the right bank, or maybe they identify the bank, but they fail to then speak to the right person there, and it just goes on and on and on, and that can really hinder someone to take their enterprise to the next level.
Okay, so let me add a couple of things to this discussion here. See, entrepreneurship, and like Dan described it, is something which tends to become your desire to grow your business. It can become a lonely activity where you are responsible for your own growth in some sense, and you are the engine and driving the whole business. And reality is, part of the reason why we say it is hard is because of this whole lack of support. If you had support to go with you, then entrepreneurship doesn't have to be as hard as it seems like. So one of the biggest things that I think is important for entrepreneurs is to have a network of other like-minded friends and people and advisors who have gone through these kinds of activities, so that they can go to someone and ask and learn from each other. And that, I think, is very critical. Having lived in the Silicon Valley and worked with a lot of companies there, if you look at one of the main reasons of success of the Silicon Valley is the energy and the people that are available to you, who are available to you for discussion, to talk about things and all of that stuff. And what happens, especially when you get to the really small and the micro entrepreneurs, that network can be broken in some sense, or not be as sophisticated or elaborate as one needs it to be. And I think many of the discussions that we have had are kind of intertwined in that sense, that we have to look at entrepreneurship not as just an individual activity where I do my thing and I'm successful. Great, that's nothing wrong with that, but that makes it so much harder. It's so much better if we all look at it as an ecosystem of players who are sounding off of each other for ideas, for markets, for business and various other things. So I think that's what makes the power of the excitement and the energy happen. And that's what I wanted to bring in this conversation today.
So Mekin, first of all, thank you for bringing ecosystem in the conversation, because our webinar would not have been, complete without that, phrase being uttered at least 20 times. So I think I counted 11. We have still 9 more to go. So anyway, no, what I would say is that ecosystem and all that is fine, and it will actually, may have an incremental effect on how an entrepreneur can do, or what an entrepreneur can grow, right? But at the end of the day, I think an entrepreneur is like a water, in that sense. Water will find its way, whether it is a 1 micrometer, 1 micromillimeter space which is there, they will figure it out, So to me, it is about those three P's, and I'll give this thing to Anand here again. That all persistence, patience, and perseverance, right? It is all about that at the end of the day. And if you're that, then of course somebody will lend a hand. And just in case you didn't notice, I run Lend a Hand India. So, and people will come to you, right, in the whole process. So it is more of, and I firmly believe in this Paulo Coelho's, quote, which is quite famous, that, when you want something, all the universe will conspires to help you, right? I think it is more question of how badly you want it. And the remaining things will all sort of fall in place after that.
I'm sorry, I have to jump in here and absolutely disagree. when you work with women entrepreneurs, you realize that it doesn't fall into place and that they don't find their way like water. And if you look at, I was trying to pull out the statistics and I failed to do it so quickly. But when you look at, anyways, the number of women-led enterprises in India is quite low. And then when you look at how much of those that exist, those 14% or so, that are in the micro segment, and then you look at the small and the medium segment, it just goes like that. It's like it's a funnel that goes the wrong way. And I think that just shows that for women entrepreneurs particularly, there seems to be gaps that are too large in the ecosystem to make it.
Yeah, and I'll back you, Julia. I feel that yes, it is the individual which has the desire to grow, and if the individual does not have the desire to grow, then it's impossible. But at the same time, right, how much is that desire? And I see it almost as a balance, right? That, okay, if the desire goes up, then it can mount even Mount Everest, or it can mount the tallest mountains. But if the desire is not that high, which is a rare commodity, the persistence is not as high as it might be in Anand's case or in your case, Raj, folks like me who've been into entrepreneurship just for 3 years right now, right? If our desire is not as high, if the barriers are lower, we may travel a little longer before we fall. So Dan, you had your hand raised.
So I want to just point out that ambition or desire to grow is not something that is just born out of nowhere. If you think things are possible, your desire gets higher.
Correct.
So, of course, there are some people who have it for whatever reason, their background, but the more you see that it's possible, the more ambition you have. And that's in support of what Julia was saying. So if you don't see, if the women or others, doesn't matter particularly, if anybody doesn't see examples of people like themselves that are succeeding, growing, getting access to resources or whatever, you won't try.
So Dan, this is brilliant. But I want you to make this less academic for us. Give us an example of a place, right? Like where either this was not there and then slowly you saw it happen, or talk about a place where you saw that this desire to grow became more and more prevalent.
Sure. Well, first of all, there's no place in the world in which it doesn't exist. Entrepreneurship, it's part of the human condition. As long as there's human society, there will be some entrepreneurs. But I give you many examples, but a small one in the village in Colombia I agree, I'll only do one. The small village in Colombia, 500,000 people we've been working with for 7 or 8 years now, has completely transformed. And I won't tell you all the process, but just one aspect of that is the fact that a few entrepreneurs, very few, a couple of dozen, learned how to grow as a starting point. And then that growth was communicated very broadly in very specific ways throughout the community. And it helped start a virtuous circle. And the question really is, how do you get that virtuous circle started? What's the most efficient, fastest, effective way to get that small virtuous circle started? You can do that. I believe that can be done almost anywhere. You have to know how to do it, like a lot of things.
And I think examples play a big role in creating that virtuous circle. It's much easier to follow someone else ahead of you rather than trying to learn from a book on what it means to be a leader.
Yeah. So let's talk about examples, right? Like, which entrepreneurs do we grow up studying, right? And what examples do we see around us? And Raj, you've been in the education system quite a while, and uh, how how does both our system, the education system, and our society enable either creation or destruction of examples and ambitions around this idea of growth or ambition?
Yes, yes. No, I think we all have a role to play in that, right? And being from the position of being able to influence something, being able to hire people and other things too. And that's why I keep saying that, all of us keep talking about degrees are useless, but at the same time, you see the job description, the first line in the first line in the job description is that, we want MSW, we want MBA, we want this, we want that, right? So I think we have to walk the talk. That is first thing which needs to happen, which means that and Delhi government has done it now, introducing an internship with small and micro enterprises, right? So generally, you look at internship is with a very large organized sector, and then what you end up thinking is that how do I get a full-time job here? As compared to if you do internship with a smaller micro enterprise, you may decide this is not for me, or you may say that, oh, this is great. I would also like to become an entrepreneur one day, right? Similarly, as I mentioned, that all of us need to cultivate entrepreneurs, those who are luxury to cultivate now, right? I mean, whether it is you, Dan, Anand, Julia, me, and all that, we have, after a lot of effort and this thing, we have reached certain point in life where we can sort of encourage people to become entrepreneur. And that's why I say that even if you're employing somebody, employ somebody who is entrepreneurial mindset and let them grow and start on their own, because one lend a hand, one persistent, one GIZ is not going to be enough in that, sense. And thinking beyond ourselves to sort of look at it and encouraging such entrepreneurship mindset is what is going to help us to go forward.
Julia, your thoughts on this, like your thoughts on how much role modeling do you see happen in amongst the Northeast women, and is with more modeling, with more role modeling happening, with examples being visible, are you seeing changes? Are you seeing stories of those entrepreneurs being told?
What I think the experience I want to share is, I think the whole relatable role model sharing or talking about women entrepreneurs and making them more known to other women entrepreneurs, building up such networks among them is a very key part of our work, for exactly that reason, that we also want that to inspire other women to step forward. From the experience of our first cohorts, I think many of the first-time entrepreneurs who were coming into the program to start a business with us, I feel that they did not really do maybe some of them did have some role models, did think of someone else that they knew who was doing this before, but many of them told us explicitly that this was the first time they met other women who were business owners. Of course, they are all aware of the big unicorns, the ones that Madan spoke about in the introduction, but those are the big tech startups, or the startups from the big cities, which don't really seem like something that you can accomplish when you live in an Imphal, for example. I'm talking average right now. I'm also stereotyping a little bit here for the sake of the conversation, maybe. But so I think for Northeast, it's a really important part that we work on making women business owners more known amongst each other. A second perspective I wanted to share is maybe just the comparison between India and Germany, which is where I grew up. I think we have a similar tendency in Germany as to it is preferred to start a government job or a regular job as an employee versus an entrepreneur, but maybe not as much as in India. And I think part of the reason is also, I think Germany is known the world over for its famous strong SME sector. But it's really true, when you grow up here, you see these small and medium-sized enterprises all around you, and that's what you grow up with. And they may specialize in the most normal product that you could possibly imagine. It's nothing super fancy. But I do think we have more of these role models around here, more of these enterprises that you grow up with and that show you, what entrepreneurship can be about.
So Dan, when you spoke early, you spoke about this interesting topic about tolerance for failure, right? And like entrepreneurs being allowed to fail, or a culture that enables failure. and you're right that India culturally is very far from it. Or India has a lot of challenges, barring maybe a few sects, few communities, few geographies where uh, failure or attempts are valued. Uh, how do we start? Where do we
So let
start?
me make a few. I'll be brief. I'll make a few distinctions. One is uh, most entrepreneurs hate to fail. Failure is catastrophic. It's not making mistakes. Let's distinguish. Making mistakes is making mistakes. If you don't want to make mistakes, don't get out of bed in the morning. And that's probably a mistake too. So I'm talking about, when I use the word failure, I mean real failure. And entrepreneurs hate that. The people that grow companies do everything they can to avoid catastrophic failure, but not avoid mistakes. On the other hand, societally, it's very important. It's essential, absolutely essential, to remove structural barriers and cultural barriers, especially structural barriers to failure, such as having excellent bankruptcy laws, decriminalizing certain kinds of failure, and allowing for employment flexibility. In other words, retraining and not protecting employment, but helping unemployment, helping people who are unemployed get training, so that human resources can be redeployed effectively. That flexibility of labor force is absolutely essential to entrepreneurship. And I think in terms of the policymakers and people trying to encourage entrepreneurship, it's as important. This is going to sound, again, a little paradoxical, perhaps. It's as important to help businesses go out of business as it is to help them succeed. If you don't have churn, won't have eventually the appropriate deployment of human resources. I can elaborate on that, and we'll get to that in our workshop, in another workshop or two. You have to have companies, make it easy for companies to fail.
So let me interrupt here, Mekin. I agree with what Dan said, but I have a few thoughts in the Indian context, which are, I think, important to differentiate here. I think if businesses, especially small businesses, other businesses failed because they tried something ambitious and it didn't work out and it failed, that's a good thing, okay? But for doing your day-to-day stuff, just because you have procedural and other stupid barriers that force you to fail, right? I don't think that is something to be celebrated. I think it's a big failure in our country right now that we are setting ourselves up for small businesses to not succeed well because we create so many barriers for their success, whether it is in getting funding, getting money for various things, or just the processes, managing cash flows, and some basic things that are hygiene, right? They should definitely not be the reason for failure of a company. If you fail because you did something ambitious and you didn't make it, I understand that, and that's part of being healthy in this whole thing. But I think for us in India, we are operating a large number of poorly, very suboptimal businesses, and they are so suboptimal partly because we have processes and procedures that are encouraging them to be suboptimal, and we celebrate these. I wouldn't say we, but there is a whole bunch of the system as such is not very conducive to success and encourages these small businesses to remain small and fail because there is very little resilience in their businesses right now. And I think this is something that we need to work on. And I like to see the big failures where people try something big and they don't make it. But I hate to see these small, 2 people, 5 people businesses making a living out of their jobs fail just because they just didn't know certain things had to be done.
Yeah. Raj, I want your inputs on this idea of the culture, right? And specifically the Indian context around it. That how do you make trying more acceptable, right? So,
No, I think to me, it starts with first. Okay, I don't believe in. Actually, I'm not too much about this, acceptance of failure and all that. If you're looking for acceptance of a failure, you may not be even an entrepreneur in the first place, in that sense. So go figure it out, in that sense, and sort of, make it happen, right, in the whole process. Because if I wait for the culture to change, maybe my fourth generation or a fourth grandson will do something. I need to be entrepreneur today. I need to do something, and I can't wait for the culture to change and otherwise, right? And to me, when we are speaking about role model, I think most of the time what ends up happening is that we speak only about successful people, right? I mean, anybody who is bring on webinar of entrepreneurship, not a single failed entrepreneur has taught on a webinar for entrepreneurship, right? In that sense. Or somebody who's in making, and one of the events which we had done, about 10 years back, and one of the best events we had done was bring in 3 entrepreneurs who were just getting, they're like started, and they were literally scared to start on their journey, not still figuring out. And I think apart from role model, being able to bring such people in the limelight who are on their journey and making mistakes, all that. Because when you bring a role model, it becomes more like a gyan session. Maine ye kiya, maine wo kiya, that's how I have $1 billion valuation now, on this and that and all that, forgetting the year 1 or year 2 of the journey, right? In that whole space. So we think that we should also make role model of such people who are on the way to become entrepreneur and facing all the difficulties in life, in that.
Thank you. Raj strongly stays on the side where he's like, hey, entrepreneur has to figure this out himself, right, and drive it. And I believe like that's super important, right? And while there is this part where, hey, how much could the ecosystem enable you, specifically to avoid what I would say avoidable failures? Like in healthcare, they have this phrase called avoidable deaths, right? And if you were to think about avoidable deaths of small businesses, like Anand's pointed out, that we have many, many, many avoidable deaths in small businesses. How can we prevent those? I feel like that we need basic healthcare system, business healthcare system, to be able to avoid those. So that I completely agree with. I want to ask the panel one last question, which is...
Can I just say something about avoidable deaths? Death of a business is not the same as the death of a human being.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to be clear about that. They're very different. So a death of a business can be a really good thing, and the resources, people can be redeployed. That doesn't happen in the human being. So I think the analogy is not a very good one. I think that if you focus on encouraging the local successes and allowing the failures to exit the system, I think we focus too much on survival of companies. What you have to focus is on growth of companies. If you have a strong growth sector, then the failures can get redeployed. In other words, the people, the human resources in the failed companies will get redeployed and reabsorbed productively. And that's what's important. That's a healthy economy.
Thank you. My last question to all the panelists, right? Like for the audience here, whether they are existing entrepreneurs, there are folks from the government, there are folks who aspire to be entrepreneurs, or there are people who are happy and know that I don't want to be an entrepreneur. Right. So for all of them, if they could do something that would make the neighborhood entrepreneur succeed more or be better, what might that be? What could they do?
So let me start on that, is to buy from your neighborhood entrepreneur. That's the only thing you can do to help everyone. I think it's all about getting the business to earn the money, and buy local, buy from your neighborhood entrepreneur. I think that's the thing you should do.
Julia.
I'm not sure I fully understood the question. Also, I had some audio gaps, but you mean me as a normal person or me as a stakeholder of the ecosystem? What can I do?
As the normal person
then I would probably go with Anand. That was a very good answer. I don't think I have any thoughts on that right now. Sorry.
Raj, do you want to add?
No, I think
that Sorry, I want to add something. If I have kids, I can raise my kids at least in a way that I don't just inspire a tendency to get a government job in them, but I try to show more openly what's possible. Maybe that would be my answer.
No, I think that the new normal that we are going to be going forward. Apart from buying local and other things too, how do we go extra mile to do that, right? So we need not compare what I'm going to pay if I import this from China versus what I'm going to pay if I, get it from Pune, if I can afford that, right? And giving such, boost local entrepreneurship is what will go a long way in the whole process.
So could you, I didn't understand exactly the question either. So if you repeat it, please.
So there are a large number of people who are watching this live and who will watch this. I am asking you for your advice to people, whether they are entrepreneurs. So this is like as a common person, what could they do that might make the entrepreneur's job any easier or any better?
So I'm not sure who's watching out there, but if you're a banker, let's say, you have an interest in more and more companies growing around you. That's a business development proposition. If you're a corporate executive, then you have an interest in companies growing around you so you can have better suppliers and also you more customers for your products. If you're a government official, then you have an interest in companies being profitable and growing and paying taxes and, of course, paying good wages to people. So if you're an educator, you have an interest in providing internships for your students and getting foundation money from the very successful entrepreneurs who will fund research. So it depends on who you are, what you can do. But I think the commonality is enlightened self-interest. If you define entrepreneurship as growth, which I do, if there's no growth, there's not entrepreneurship ultimately. If you define it as growth and there's more and more growth happening around you, it benefits you in specific ways depending on who you are. You have a stake in the ecosystem supporting growth around you.
So Dan, I'm going to use your argument and put Anand in a tough spot, which is, hey, if this is about growth and if this is about like businesses doing well, businesses would do well if they are high quality, right? So why should we buy local and why should we not buy high quality, which would force the local entrepreneur to up their game?
Yeah, and I think it's a very good question, but you got to start somewhere, right? So if you start out by saying that I'm only going to buy high quality imported or stuff that is at least locally in the local context imported, and I just want it to be the cheapest, you will kill all your neighbors in that process. So I think you need a starting point, and I think for us, in the context that we are in, I think it is important that we pay premium for local products, buy local products, and yeah, I mean we will get quality and price if we have enough volume, which is possible.
Can I follow up? I want to reinforce that point. You can also groom. If you're a large enough company, you have an interest in grooming your supply chain, and you have an interest in your supply chain being local. So you can invest. It's not donating blood. It's not just donating. It's enlightened self-interest.
And in fact, Mekin, on that point here, even within and India, we have told our employees that if you want to go out and implement our model, we'll protect your salary for 2 years and then also give you seed funding, right? So I think that is what it will take for it to sort of go forward, because one lend a hand, one persistent, one this thing is not going to be enough, and it's our duty actually, not as any philanthropic or anything like that. It's in, like what Dan mentioned, it's in our self-interest to be sort of pursuing that and invest in such manner.
Julia, your thoughts on that somewhat paradoxical topic, buying local and enabling and quality, and this idea that Dan's put forth, which is nurturing local to become high quality.
I think the panel has, I mean, I don't think my opinion differs on that, because I agree, if you want to grow your local economy, you need consumers for that, right? And I think that is where consumers play a role to encourage that. So I think I'm very much with Anand in terms of course you as a consumer, and I think there's a filter in there as well. You're not going to spend your money on a bad product just because it's local. So I don't see so much. I mean, there may be some local firms favored by consumers buying local who are not the best of the best, but I don't think it will necessarily bring about, or it will prevent bad businesses from going out of business and good businesses rising up. So I don't see so black and white.
Yeah, fantastic. This has been a fascinating panel. Thank you, everyone. Like all of you have been deeply engaged and were willing to take positions. So my hope and our hope together was that this not be a boring post-lunch session which makes people sleep. I would think that, at least for me, my energy levels right now are very high. I hope it is the same for a lot of the audience. I do think that I took away a lot from this panel in terms of not trying to reduce things into very binary kind of answers, one way or the other. That there is a balance between the entrepreneur's persistence, the entrepreneur's desire to grow, and the ecosystem. There is a balance between entrepreneurs who are local and can be groomed and grow, and quality, and figure out how do you enable your local neighborhood entrepreneurs to be able to get to that point where there is high quality. But there is that balance, and it's not that you can have either or it's only one way or the other. I think Dan summed it up beautifully that, hey, if there are enlightened self-interest, and Raj, you might want to add this to your list of jargons, right? But the idea that, hey, every individual, right, as long as they are bringing in and doing this, because doing it will help them grow, right? Whether it's a large corporate, whether it's a university, whether it's a bank, and they do this, they enable an entrepreneurial ecosystem, because as a result, the bank grows, as a result, the university grows, as a result, the large corporate grows. So it's in all our individual interests to enable an entrepreneurial ecosystem to thrive in our country. And I feel the current pandemic is a good opportunity to make us think and to make us act around some of these things that may not be going so well as of now. There's opportunity for each of us to figure out, like, hey, where does our long-term enlightened self-interest lie? And I now almost made an acronym of this. But yeah, I think with that, I want to thank the panelists for taking the time out and participating in this panel with such vigor and such candor. Special thanks to Dan for waking up at, what, 2 in the morning? Okay, 5 in the morning. So it's not, thank you. I feel less guilty. Right. And yeah, I hope the audience enjoyed this. With that, we're out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, I think that was a terrific panel discussion. And making to your point, at least I didn't think of coffee at all the last 1 hour. I'm super energized. I don't think I'll need coffee for the next 2 hours as well. So thank you for a very illuminating discussion on mindsets, heart sets, role models, cultures, and the new acronym that you're talking about, enlightened self-interest. Lots of learning. Thank you so much. And for the audience who participated in the poll questions, getting better. A lot of you got both the questions right. What percentage of India's entrepreneurs are driven by necessity than opportunity? About 20% of you got 66% right. What percentage of India's 6 crore MSMEs employ more than 10 people? That's 2%. And the last one was very interesting, is an opinion poll. In your opinion, how can we create more women entrepreneurs as business owners? Almost all of you take on the choice of, let's address problems that limit women entrepreneurs to fully dedicate themselves to entrepreneurship. And I think that's a lot of work to be done there. So as we call to close this day's convening, I am amazed at how all the themes have fallen together so well, right? Again, we keep saying that it's all about the seed, soil, and climate. Seed is about entrepreneurial mindsets and a culture that nurtures it. Locally, soil is local infrastructure, access to markets, finance, etc. And climate is enabling rules, regulations, and of course, how do you build a culture that respects and celebrates entrepreneurship both at the local and the national level? And we believe that we have to bring the seed, soil, and climate together at every local community, at the district, taluka level to unleash this wave of mass entrepreneurship. And as our good friend Arun Maira says, systems will work together only when we listen deeply, learn continuously, collaborate consciously, act in symphony. And today's conversation is one example of all of these four things happening in a very interesting way. And will again, we have an ambitious mission of creating 10 million new mass entrepreneurs by 2030, 50 million more jobs, and 50% being women. We clearly realize that this convening has ended. This is just the day zero of unleashing mass entrepreneurship, and we look forward to working with each and every one of you to make this dream a reality. I must end by thanking all of our MSME task force members, all of our panelists. The shout out to Dan, who's woken up really early to be a part of this. Facebook and Your Story, who made it happen, and of course to all my wonderful colleagues that came for putting this day together. And a big shout out to all of you who participated with a lot of energy, asked questions, and engaged wholeheartedly. Thank you so much for being with us, and stay tuned. Lots to do and lots to work together. Thank you so much.